Revenge with Karen. I knew it was going to be one of those nights when Gwen clinked her wine glass and called me background furniture. 400 employees. Fancy hotel ballroom. Champagne towers and sea base no one actually ate. And right there in front of my entire team, the CEO's wife, dripping in diamonds she didn't earn, looked me dead in the face and said, "So Linda, when are you finally going to be worth something here?" Laughter. Nervous at first, then louder. Contagious, like a slow-building rash. I smiled, but not the kind that reaches your eyes. I smiled like someone who's heard the starter pistol and knows exactly where the finish line is and where to bury the bodies along the way. I raised my glass. 8 months ago, I said. She tilted her head like a confused Pomeranian, then let out this shrill little laugh that sounded like it was rehearsed in a mirror. I added, just loud enough to carry past the jazz quartet. "Understand tomorrow morning. When legal finally opens that report they've been too busy to review, that shut her up. I'll back up for a second, though. My name's Linda, 12 years at Haverson Capital. Operations Director, technically, though I stopped using my title after they gave the VP of Infrastructure spot to the founders, Godson, Brent, whose only qualification was once winning a Fortnite tournament in the break room. I built half the back-end systems this company runs on. I've trained, fixed, streamlined, optimized. Quietly, cleanly. No drama, no politics, no backroom handshakes. Just discipline and spreadsheets that don't lie. That's the problem, apparently. I don't perform, I don't golf. I don't flirt with execs in Patagonia vests. I don't drink at networking mixers and giggle at jokes about Karen from HR. I do my job better than anyone else here. Somehow, I've become invisible. You ever feel like you're the steel beams holding up a building full of glass offices? Useful, load-bearing, but never seen? That's me, or it was. And hey, while you're here, if any of that sounded familiar, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Apparently 95% of people don't, and I promise it helps more than you think. Plus, I've got a few more boardroom bombs coming. I wouldn't want you to miss when the next one detonates. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Okay, back to the evening that set everything in motion. See, the thing about Gwen is she doesn't work here. She's not on payroll, no badge, no title. But somehow she's everywhere. Hiring events, she's there, sipping Riesling and judging people's blazers. Strategy meetings, oh, she's got insights because she once owned a Pilate studio in Napa. Nobody corrects her because she's married to Charles Haverson, the man who signs the paychecks. And Charles, bless his wandering attention span, thinks Gwen brings culture to the firm. You know what Gwen actually brings? Contractors, vendors, design consultants, and brand evangelists who coincidentally all used to work with her sorority sisters. I once tried flagging a billing discrepancy, $38,000 for mood boards that looked like they were made in Canva by a stoned intern. Know what legal told me? Not your lane, Linda. That became a theme. Not your lane, not your decision, not your problem. So I did what any underestimated woman with a good memory and a lot of spreadsheets does. I started collecting. Names, invoices, signatures. Conversations half overheard in the elevator. Times, dates, payment schedules. I'm not flashy, but I'm surgical when I need to be. And I knew if I wanted anyone to believe me. Need more than a gut feeling and a couple red flags. I'd need a map through the rot and a body count. But that came later. That night at the awards dinner, that was the spark. Gwen had gotten bolder lately. Crueler. She called my team the office drones. Said we had zero vibe. She laughed when I asked about cross-functional alignment. Said I should let the boys handle the big rocks. And Charles just smiled like she was performing at a country club talent show. What Gwen didn't know is that 8 months prior, I'd already made my first call. Not to HR, not to the board, but to someone far more dangerous to a company like this. An outside compliance firm, not flashy, not loud, but legally lethal when provoked. And baby, Gwen had provoked. A month after Gwen tried to publicly reduce me to IKEA decor, I found myself in the hallway outside the executive conference room, waiting for the espresso machine to finish hissing out a thimble of brown water that somehow cost $18 a pod. That's when I heard it. "No, Gwen, I swear, procurement's gonna throw a fit if we bring Calix back in." "Oh, please," Gwen snorted. "Calix is gone. This is ClearPath, totally different entity." "Same results, less red tape. You sure legal's cool with that?" the VP asked, voice shaky. "I'm not asking legal, Mitchell. I'm telling you, ClearPath is handling the next 3 campaigns. I already signed off. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just let the hiss of espresso cover the blood spike in my ears. Calix. That vendor was blacklisted 3 years ago after our internal audit team found out they were double billing us for strategic asset assessments, which turned out to be PDF templates they bought on Fiverr. I remembered the fallout vividly. Charles had even sent out an all-staff email. We are committed to transparency and integrity in our vendor relationships. Apparently, Gwen's commitment had an expiration date. Back at my desk, I opened the ledger. No Calix, but I found ClearPath Dynamics LLC billing us under the same project codes Calix had used. Same invoice structure. Same zip code. Same font. Same font. The contracts were there too, newly uploaded. No one from Ops had been looped in. No vendor vetting files. No compliance flag. But the sign-off section, Gwen Haverson's name, scribbled in with the careless confidence of someone who thought no one ever read the fine print. That's when the cold clarity settled in. This wasn't just rich lady meddling. This was calculated, coordinated, dangerous. So I did what no one else had the spine to do. I pulled up a name from a card I kept tucked behind my work ID. A contact I'd met at a conference years ago. Used to run compliance at a healthcare firm until he helped expose a kickback scheme tied to cardiac stent overuse. Quiet guy, dead eyes, perfect memory. His business card just said Edwin Malik, Integrity Solutions. I called the number. He picked up on the third ring. Haverson Capital, I said. There's a vendor called ClearPath. I believe it's a front. There was a pause. Do you have documentation? I will, I said. Another pause. Okay. Let's assume this conversation didn't happen. Email me using the Proton address I'm about to give you. No attachments. Paste content as plain text. Subject lines should look like grocery lists. I wrote it all down. When we hung up, I sat still for a full minute. Not scared, not proud, just activated, like someone had finally flipped the switch I didn't know had been installed in me. That night, instead of watching my usual rerun of Chopped with a glass of boxed wine, I built a new folder on my home laptop. Labeled it Spreadsheets Gwen, innocuous, boring, lethal. I started with the invoices, then the timelines, then the cross-checks with procurement emails. Edwin had told me, build the story like a prosecutor. Leave no room for interpretation. I wasn't just flagging a mistake anymore. I was building a case. Over the next few days, I traced ClearPath's formation back to a registered address in Scottsdale, a P.O. box shared with 3 other entities. One of them, a consulting group Gwen had raved about during a beach offsite. They totally get my brand energy. I cross-referenced company filings. The manager on record for ClearPath, a woman named Hallie Bowers, Gwen's old roommate, maid of honor at her wedding. LinkedIn said she was a creative operations evangelist, which is the kind of made-up title people use when they're laundering something. I didn't tell anyone, not legal, not HR, not even the one sympathetic director who still brought me coffee sometimes and said things like, "You deserved better, you know." No one, just me and Edwin and the spreadsheets. I was about to start turning over stones no one wanted touched, and I was ready to find whatever was rotting underneath. I sent the first batch of red flags, vendor discrepancies, shell registration patterns, invoice overlaps to legal on a Tuesday. 3 days later, I got a reply. Not from the general counsel, not even from his assistant. Just a generic message, appreciate the flag. We're currently prioritizing merger-related items and will revisit this at a later date. Translation, Gwen is untouchable. Go away, spreadsheet lady. I forwarded the same package to HR, adding a polite but firm note asking if vendor relationships involving close personal ties fell within their ethical purview. The head of HR, Tricia, who once described herself as a neutral vessel for company energy, called me instead of replying. "Linda, I get that you're concerned," she said in her breathy yoga instructor voice, "but Gwen's not technically an employee, so we really don't have jurisdiction here. She's authorizing vendor contracts. I mean, sort of, but she's not like, in the system, you know? She's authorizing contracts with her name." Right, so that's more of a Charles thing, not ours. I hung up before I said something that would get me fired for cause. Sat there with the phone in my hand, looking out at the parking lot. An entire company was being hollowed out from the inside. The people paid to prevent that were doing sun salutations in the break room and pretending the queen wasn't running her own side empire under their noses. I don't know what made him show up at my desk that afternoon. Maybe he'd overheard something. Maybe he just had a working sense of ethics. But Marcus Quen appeared with a mug of black coffee and a quiet voice. "You flagged ClearPath, right?" I didn't answer, just raised an eyebrow. He set the mug down. I ran their EIN against our procurement logs. It's clean on paper. But their billing address matches one we had flagged back in 19. For something called Bright Range Creative, canceled after a contractor came forward claiming they were billing for non-existent interns. Guess who the founder was? I blinked. Hallie Bowers, he smiled. Bingo. That was the first moment I didn't feel entirely alone. Marcus was young, maybe 30 tops. New suit, unassuming. Kind of guy most people overlooked at meetings unless they needed a ruling on compliance codes. But he was sharp, and apparently just paranoid enough to be useful. We started meeting in quiet corners of the building, empty conference rooms. Late lunch breaks in the wellness pod. He brought access, I brought documentation. Together, we built something that looked less like a concerned employee's report and more like the opening chapter of a criminal case. ClearPath wasn't the only name. There was Arbor 9, then Lexivox, then an art therapy consultancy out of Portland called The Third Ear, which billed us $14,600 for executive emotional harmonics. Each one tied, directly or indirectly, to Gwen, a friend, a cousin, a former bridesmaid who's finally getting her turn. Marcus and I drew a chart, connections, money flow, approval signatures. It looked like a spider web, only this one didn't catch flies, it just funneled money. I shouldn't be doing this, Marcus said one night, rubbing his temples. If this gets out, it won't, I said. Not until it's ready. What does ready look like when it doesn't feel like we're the only ones who care? He looked at me. We are the only ones who care. He wasn't wrong. But caring wasn't enough. I needed evidence. Patterns, something bulletproof, so I started building it on weekends. After hours, during fake dentist appointments. A secret report, plain formatting, minimal headers, just the facts, cross-referenced and time-stamped. Edwin coached me through it over Proton Mail. Every document added had to answer a single question. If I were the last honest person in the company, could this still hold up in court? Each night, I backed it up to a thumb drive disguised as a broken key fob in my purse. I labeled the file SOP Update Q3 and buried it 3 folders deep on a backup laptop that looked like it hadn't been touched since 2012. I stopped using company Wi-Fi. I stopped printing anything in the building. I stopped trusting anyone who smiled too wide at Gwen's jokes. But I didn't stop building, because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about me. It became about making sure no one else got silenced, sidelined, or laughed at like I was. Not again, not on my watch. The new org chart dropped on a Thursday, no fanfare. Just a PDF attached to a quarterly realignment announcement email, buried beneath blurbs about wellness challenges and a vague promise of cross-functional empowerment. I opened it out of habit, expecting the usual recycled nonsense. But then I saw it, my role, reassigned, title gone. The promotion I'd been gunning for, quietly promised by 3 different VPs over the past 6 months. It went to a guy named Connor Hastings, 29, wore Yeezys to board briefings. The same guy who once slacked me, hey, how do you make the cells do math again? Connor, who couldn't find a VLOOKUP with both hands and a GPS. I didn't rage. Didn't send the email I drafted and deleted 3 times. Didn't even slam my laptop shut. Just stared at the screen until the fluorescent lights above my desk buzzed loud enough to make my molars ache. Later that day, I found myself at a catered luncheon for the board and senior staff. I'd been invited as a silent observer, which is HR speak for we need someone to take notes and refill the iced tea. Gwen floated in like she always did, beige silk blouse, vintage brooch, and that permanent squint she wore like a mask of superiority. Halfway through a dry Caesar salad, she turned to Charles and stage whispered, "We don't promote folks who get more excited about spreadsheets than people." The table laughed. I didn't. She looked at me, smiling like we were in on the same joke. I smiled back through gritted teeth, and in that moment, the entire war crystallized. This wasn't just about misuse of funds or shady vendor shell games. This was about erasure, about being surgically written out of something I had spent over a decade building, because I didn't look or sound like the vision Gwen had for the company, because I took pride in logic and precision instead of curated energy and Instagrammable vision boards. That night, I didn't pour a glass of wine. I didn't rewatch reruns. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and added a new section to the report. Patterned obstruction of advancement opportunities, 42 pages. Time-stamped feedback requests. Performance reviews with exceeds expectations highlighted. Names, dates, follow-up emails. instances where less qualified male colleagues were promoted or given visibility. I even included a particularly damning email from a VP who accidentally copied me instead of a different Linda, in which he wrote, "Give her a candy project. She's not partner material, but she'll keep the ops stuff clean." Highlighted that one in bold. By 2:37 a.m., the report had grown to 112 pages, not including exhibits. I converted it to PDF and saved a copy to the drive in my key fob, another to an encrypted folder in the cloud, disguised as a dead spreadsheet for Q4 toilet paper procurement. I emailed a sanitized update to Edwin, subject line, "Canned peaches, organic." At 3:04 a.m., I finally checked my phone. A new message from Marcus. "This will bring heat. Make sure you're fireproof." I stared at it. That wasn't encouragement. That was a warning. Because now the report didn't just contain evidence of fraud, it contained intent, pattern, malice, and somewhere deep inside, Gwen had to know someone was following the scent. I started noticing changes. My badge access suddenly stopped working on the 5th floor, where legal operated. I was told it was a system error. IT didn't respond to my ticket. My calendar began populating with shadow invites, placeholder meetings that vanished the moment I opened them. Someone removed me from the recurring leadership syncs. When I asked about it, I was told it must have been an automation glitch. A glitch with Gwen's handwriting all over it. I didn't push back. I pushed forward. I bought a burner phone. I started writing notes by hand. I even switched my walking route from the garage, just in case. Paranoia? Maybe. But when someone as powerful as Gwen starts sniffing the air, you don't wait to see if she bites. You lay your traps, you bait them with silence, and you make damn sure that when she lunges, she falls face first into a pit she dug herself. Because the queen might be untouchable, but the board, they still bleed when you cut deep enough. The first audit request came disguised as a casual Slack ping from finance. "Hey Linda," grinning face with smiling eyes, just doing a random spot check on Q2 vendor logs. Mind forwarding everything from April through June? Random. That was the word they used. 2 days later, it was another random request, this time from internal audit, asking for reconciliation breakdowns on minor expense line items, including 2-year-old copier toner purchases. Then a request for a call. Then 3 calls, a formal meeting invite with a subject line that might as well have said, "We're coming for you," but in a friendly font. The tone shifted fast. My email style, crisp, precise, with 0 emoji, was suddenly flagged by HR as borderline hostile. I was called in for check-in meeting and handed a printout of an email I'd sent to procurement 6 weeks earlier that simply said, "Please clarify which account this falls under." I believe it's misclassified. Apparently, that line was interpreted as accusatory and aggressive. That's when I knew Gwen was getting spooked. She didn't yell, she didn't confront, she didn't call me into Charles's office and threaten to make things difficult. Gwen was smarter than that. Instead, she started quietly flooding my world with sand, just enough to slow me down, make me second-guess, make me visible in the worst ways. Then came the envelope. No return address. Just L. Marsh typed in uneven courier font and slid into my physical mailbox at work, something no one had used in years. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an invoice from ClearPath Dynamics, billed at $23,800 for consultation deliverables, bearing my name, my department code, and my digital signature. I never touched it. I hadn't even seen it in the system. But there it was, rendered in perfect digital ink, time-stamped, tagged, filed. The implication was clear. If I kept poking the bear would make it look like I was the one stealing honey. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I handed the invoice to Marcus. He didn't speak for a full minute, just stared at it, flipping it over like it might reveal some invisible watermark. "This signature, was it auto-pulled from the document vault?" I nodded. I checked the metadata. The logs say I uploaded it at 2:13 a.m. last Thursday. Online then? No, I was at my sister's birthday dinner. She's got a selfie of me holding a taco at that exact time. He smirked just barely. "Well then, let's look under the hood." It took him 40 minutes. He accessed an internal system Gwen likely didn't even know existed, one built by our IT lead back before Charles decided cybersecurity was a low-priority expense. "Here," Marcus said, pointing at a string of characters. "See that? What is it?" "It's the terminal ID. Whoever uploaded this used a machine tied to the exec ops network, not your department." I leaned closer. "It's Gwen's assistant," he said flatly. "Natalie, her badge ID is embedded in the session hash." I felt like I'd swallowed a brick. Marcus leaned back in his chair. We just caught them trying to plant evidence. He stared at me. Linda, this has teeth, but it also has claws. I didn't respond, just nodded slowly. That night, bought a second phone under a friend's name and paid cash. I kept it powered off and hidden in a fake can of chicken soup in the back of my pantry. I used it only to send encrypted updates to Edwin, attaching each new piece of the puzzle with labels like Q3 budget notes and snack inventory report. I also made an appointment with a legal advisor recommended by Marcus's sister. We met at a gas station parking lot like we were in a bad spy movie, gave her a copy of my lease, and paid her to transfer it into a land trust registered under an LLC I'd created years ago for freelance consulting work. If they were going to come for me, I'd be hard to pin down. Innocent people don't always win, especially not in companies like Haverson Capital, where power lives in whispers and revenge wears perfume. But I wasn't innocent anymore. I was prepared. Every spreadsheet I opened now felt like a weapon. Every invoice they faked, every audit they buried me in, every rumor they whispered about me in glass offices, I logged it, archived it, tagged it with timestamps and IP addresses. Because there's a certain freedom in knowing the people trying to destroy you have no idea you already built the guillotine. And the blade was almost ready. They say every empire ends in a whisper. But sometimes ends with a microphone in a hotel ballroom and a venomous joke that clings to your skin like a rash. We were at the annual leadership retreat, Lake Geneva, white linen name tags, mandatory trust-building exercises involving ropes, blindfolds, and the kind of fake vulnerability that makes your teeth itch. Charles stood at the podium with all the charisma of a sedated mall Santa, thanking our people for their dedication and alignment. Gwen, wine in hand at 11:42 a.m., took the mic during the Q&A session, grinning like she was about to unveil a game show prize. And let's not forget our backbone, Linda Marsh, our favorite spinster who makes the trains run on time, even if she never quite catches one herself. There it was. The room sucked in a breath. Nervous laughter followed, a few horrified glances in my direction. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, stone-faced, as Gwen grinned at me like she'd just handed me a corsage at prom. She was escalating. Hard. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with my boss, Stephen, the kind of executive who wore Patagonia vests over button-downs and thought transparency meant seeing you on the email that buried your career. We're pivoting your role, Linda, he said, hands steepled like he was about to deliver a TED talk on empathy. It's part of a broader reorg. Be transitioning into a new position focusing on cross-departmental coordination for our culture enhancement initiatives. I don't understand, I said. Where does that sit? Well, technically, it doesn't report into any single division. It's more of an agile, floating stewardship role. Do I still manage the ops team? He glanced down at the folder in front of him, pretending to check a note he'd already memorized. Direct reports will be redistributed across existing leads to better leverage their verticals. In English, I was being shelved, stripped of my team, my projects, my power. They wanted me isolated, disoriented, forgotten. Instead, I got focused. That night, I opened the report again. Now over 170 pages. I added new appendices, section headers, internal Slack logs with matching invoice uploads, screenshot comparisons of vendor letterheads, side-by-side of Natalie's terminal activity and the forged invoice metadata. And at the end, a 3-page summary. Direct, clinical, ruthless. I printed a copy, sealed it in a weatherproof envelope, tucked it inside a hollowed-out financial regulations textbook on my shelf. Then I sent an encrypted copy to Edwin. Within the hour, he responded. It meets federal thresholds, multiple fraud indicators, misappropriation, obstruction, collusion. I stared at that last word for a long time. Collusion. It sounded like something from a political thriller, not my life, not this beige-carpeted, HR policy-riddled hellscape where performance reviews used phrases like synergize your narrative. But that was the truth now. I wasn't just documenting bad behavior anymore. I was sitting on a ticking bomb, surrounded by people too smug to hear the timer. The next morning, I walked into work and found my desk had been temporarily relocated to a vacant storage office with no window and a folding table for a desk. My desktop monitor was gone, sent to IT for updates, they said. My badge only worked for floors 1 through 3 now. It didn't matter. Let them bury me. I'd already dug the escape tunnel. I'd built a weapon no one could ignore. Every slight, every reassignment, every smirk Gwen threw my way, it only added fuel. Isolation wasn't defeat, it was freedom. I didn't have to pretend anymore, not to be agreeable, not to be grateful, not to laugh along when they made me the punchline. The masks were off, and I wasn't planning to put mine back on. The night before I pulled the trigger, I sat on my couch in sweatpants, surrounded by the ghosts of who I used to be, old notebooks, dried-out highlighters, half-drunk cups of tea. 12 years of my life had been turned into 187 pages of names, dates, contracts, forged signatures, backdoor payments, kickbacks, vendor fraud, and complicity stretching all the way up to the executive suite. And Gwen, she thought she was bulletproof. She wasn't ready. I opened my laptop one final time, attached the report, and composed the email to the board's legal committee. Simple, clinical language. No dramatics. Just attached is a compliance escalation package, documenting activity that falls outside the scope of legal and ethical vendor conduct as outlined in the Haverson Capital Code of Ethics. Please review at your earliest convenience. I didn't send it immediately. No, I scheduled it for Monday morning, 9:03 a.m. Why 9:03? Because I knew legal checked their inboxes at 9 o'clock on the dot. The 3-minute delay would ensure it hit mid-scroll, right after they'd skimmed the usual barrage of merger noise and calendar syncs, but just before their coffee kicked in. But I wasn't done. There was one more thing. I pulled up my contact list and found an old email, Herschel Keene, Regulatory Affairs Advisor, Southeast Region. We'd met at a compliance seminar in Tampa 6 years ago. I remembered him because he wore a mustard yellow tie and told me, after 3 bourbons, I don't work for companies, I work for the system. I sent him a blind copy of the report. No commentary, no explanation. Just the file, renamed innocuously. Vendor Review Q1 follow-up PDF. I encrypted it with a custom password only someone in regulatory would understand. 42 CFR 493.1835. A code that, if he remembered his own presentation, would ring like a fire alarm in his brain. And then I waited. Next evening was the annual awards dinner. Black tie, gourmet hors d'oeuvres, flower arrangements so large they blocked your view of the stage. It was held at the downtown Marriott Ballroom, with 400 employees in various stages of dress code panic and forced smiles. I wore navy. Simple, clean, hair tied back. No jewelry. Gwen arrived late, buzzed before she even hit the table, swanning around in a dress that looked like she mugged a chandelier. She air-kissed 3 VPs, grabbed a flute of champagne, and slid into her seat with all the grace of a sitcom villain. The awards were already dragging by the time she got the mic. She was supposed to give a short recognition toast. Instead, she launched into a 10-minute ramble about resilience and vision and the power of creative disruption. And then she turned to me. "Linda," she trilled, raising her glass. "So, when are you finally going to be worth something here?" Few polite chuckles. A few horrified gasps. Someone dropped a fork. I picked up my wine glass, looked her dead in the eyes. No smile, no anger, just stillness. 8 months ago, I said, the room froze, like someone had pulled the emergency brake on reality. Gwen blinked, confused. I leaned in, voice just loud enough to carry. "You'll understand tomorrow. When legal finally opens that report they've been too busy to review." She snorted, a full-bodied, tipsy laugh that echoed off the chandelier. "Oh, Linda," she said, waving me off like a bad dream, still living in spreadsheets and fantasy. I didn't respond. I just lifted my glass and took a long sip. Somewhere across the room, Marcus met my eyes. No nod, no smile, just quiet understanding. He knew, Gwen didn't. But by this time tomorrow, the entire kingdom would. The air felt different that morning. Still, heavy, like the hour before a summer storm. Quiet enough to hear your own pulse, charged enough to raise goosebumps on your arms. I parked in my usual spot, 3rd row from the loading dock, and walked in without rushing. Gray slacks, simple black blouse, neutral lipstick, a smile that didn't try too hard to be anything. I carried my usual coffee in one hand and a flash drive in the other, though I knew I wouldn't need it. When I stepped through the glass front doors of Haverson Capital's headquarters, the place was already humming. Phones were ringing, not the polite kind, real ringing, frantic, jagged. Reception looked like a funeral parlor, stiff and stunned. The executive wing was sealed off with a red "Do Not Disturb Legal in Session" sign hanging from the conference room door like a warning flag. Through the frosted glass, I caught a glimpse of the general counsel pacing, with a stack of papers in hand, the CFO sweating through his collar. The elevator opened behind me. Gwen, wearing oversized sunglasses inside, like a hungover influencer, and carrying a Starbucks venti latte like a royal scepter. She waltzed in without noticing the shift in the air. Until she did. "Good morning," she chirped to the receptionist, then paused mid-step. Her nose twitched, her posture stiffened. The air wasn't behaving the way she liked it to. And then she saw him. Elias Ramirez, head of compliance. Cold, competent, and allergic to flattery, stood near the elevator holding a thin manila envelope. When he spotted Gwen, he didn't smile. He just approached, wordlessly handed her the envelope, and gestured for her to follow. She blinked. "Is this about the Q4 contractor roll-up?" He didn't answer. Just walked. She followed, muttering something under her breath about people getting bold. They disappeared behind the glass door of the adjacent conference room. I kept walking, past a VP whose face looked like he'd seen a ghost. Past an intern who whispered, "Is today the announcement?" To no one in particular. I reached my desk, sat down, placed my coffee beside the keyboard and didn't touch it, logged into my terminal, waited. 2 minutes later, the company intranet crashed. At first, it was just the main dashboard, error 500. Then the internal chat stopped refreshing. Then the vendor portal turned into a spinning wheel. System admin pinged out a mass email from his personal Gmail, experiencing unexpected system instability. Please do not attempt to reboot local terminals. In other words, don't touch anything. We're under review. A chill ran through the building like an invisible wave. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter, forced, office-brand laughter, stopped altogether. People stared at monitors like they were waiting for divine revelation to come through Outlook. Across the bullpen, Marcus walked past my desk without slowing down. As he passed, he slid a folded note beside my keyboard like it was nothing. Kept walking. I waited 3 seconds, then opened it. One word, buzzing, that was the signal. It meant legal had opened the report. It meant Herschel Keene had replied to the blind copy. It meant Gwen's name was no longer a punchline or a nuisance. It was a liability. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly. Not vindicated, not gleeful, just still. This wasn't the climax. This was the silence before it. I watched people scurry. VPs argue in hushed tones near the elevators. One director wheeled his suitcase out early, head down. I sipped my coffee finally, room temp now, and stared at my monitor like it was any other Monday. But inside, I knew. The engine had already started, and it was heading straight for the throne. At exactly 11:17 a.m., building's rhythm changed forever. It didn't start with a bang. It started with shoes, thick-soled, polished, deliberate. 3 men and 1 woman in navy suits, no badges visible but none needed. You could smell it, you could feel it. Authority, federal. The kind of entrance that makes time freeze in corporate corridors. They walked straight past reception. Straight past the security desk. Straight through the executive wing doors without a word. No hesitation, no second glance, just purpose. Then came Gwen's voice. Sharp, disoriented, echoing off the marble like a bad omen. "What the hell is this? I'm not even on payroll." No answer. The boardroom door shut behind them. The air locked. 2 minutes later, a scream. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't long. Just one sharp, involuntary puncture in the building's facade. The sound of a woman realizing, for the first time, that the game she thought she was winning had rules she never understood. People froze mid-keystroke. Phones stopped ringing. Even the finance bros who never noticed anything beyond their own reflection paused, eyes darting toward the executive floor like prey sensing a shift in the food chain. A minute later, my name came through the internal chat. From Marcus, "Come to 12E now," quietly. No subject. No salutation, just that. I stood. Smoothed my blouse, left my coffee. Walked through the bullpen like a ghost, not fast, not slow, just inevitable. When I opened the door to 12E, Marcus was already standing. No jacket, tie loosened. Face pale with adrenaline but steady. In his hand, the report, printed, annotated, tabbed. "They finally read it," he said. I glanced past him. The long table was nearly empty. A few board members stood clustered near the far end, murmuring with legal. One of them kept rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to unscrew his own head. The CFO was seated, hands folded, staring straight ahead as if someone had died. And Gwen's chair, empty, her nameplate gone. I stepped inside, nodded once, and turned back to the window. The city kept moving outside. Cars, buses, birds, completely oblivious to the detonation that had just occurred 33 floors above street level. Word spread like blood in water. By noon, IPO announcement had been pulled from the company website. Deferred pending internal restructuring, the press release said. Internally, everyone knew Gwen was out. Natalie had already been escorted from the building, box of belongings tucked under one arm like a bad joke. The company lawyers? Silent, red-eyed, planning triage. At 12:42, Charles Haverson, the man who once called me reliable but not strategic, stormed down the hallway like a man chasing a ghost. He didn't look at anyone, didn't slow down until he passed me. And in that half-second, I looked up from my desk, eyes calm, voice quiet. You should have checked your wife's signature folder. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, he knew. She was the match. I was the fuse. And the whole damn empire had just burned exactly the way I planned. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.